why we should do away with standardized testing. So one of the most stressful things that I think most people can agree on, one of the most stressful things in life is walking in to take the SAT for the first time, whether that's your freshman year, your junior year, your sophomore year. It's one of the more stressful things that a student can go through in their life. A lot of times students feel like their entire future, whether that's college acceptance, their career, or both, all hinges on how they do on this particular morning from 8 o'clock to 11 o'clock. So why do we have standardized tests? Ever since the advent of public schooling, there has always been some form of standardized testing used to measure a student's progress. While students have not always been as rigorously tested as they are today, standardized tests have always been present in some form. Today, students are taking an abhorrent number of standardized tests throughout their schooling. While it is true that standardized tests are necessary to measure students' progress as well as the efficacy of schools, one must recognize that standardized tests are not the only possible measure of student achievement. Standardized testing should be eliminated in schools as they not only fail to accurately demonstrate students' knowledge, but they also take away from valuable class time, while simultaneously stressing students and causing negative side effects on those taking them. Instead, students should use alternative methods of assessment combined with analysis of students' performance in their classes in lieu of testing. So why does our current school system require so much testing? What is considered a reasonable amount of standardized testing? The average person would likely assume that 2 or 3 standardized tests per year are reasonable. Too much testing would take away from time that would be better spent elsewhere. However, according to Christina Rigza, a student entering pre-kindergarten today will take, on average, 113 standardized assessments by the time he or she graduates from public school. This means that the average student takes over 9 standardized tests per year of public school. So if we were to do away with standardized testing, how would we measure students' progress? Proponents of testing argue that standardized testing is the only objective way to measure students' performance. However, I would like to argue that alternative methods of assessment are just as effective at measuring a student's knowledge as a bubble sheet test. Assessments could be hands-on, interactive, and enjoyable if we were to just simply rethink our position on testing. Picture this. When a student walks in on test day, instead of being faced with a cold, bleak gymnasium with hundreds of desks scattered throughout it, they meet a smiling instructor with whom they will be having a conversation in a new language. Or students can build out of popsicle sticks to test their knowledge of geometry and physics. Students can spend their day outdoors collecting data to study biodiversity in their local ecosystem, or they could go to a museum to study their knowledge of history. 35 hours. That is the amount of time that the average student in Ohio will spend each year on standardized testing. This is the equivalent to an entire week of classes. Throughout the course of a student's academic journey, they will miss a total of 13 weeks worth of in-class learning time to sit in a large gymnasium bubbling in answers on a sheet of paper. In many states, there's a required amount of time that must be spent in class to receive credit, also known as seat time. Giving students back an entire week of class per year would help immensely in reaching the necessary amount of time needed to receive credit for a class. High scores on standardized tests might indicate only that the student is good at taking those kinds of tests, not that the student knows how to apply the knowledge to real-world problems. This is a quote from Joshua Tenenbaum, a professor of cognitive science at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. With the prevalence of standardized testing in schools, as well as the emphasis placed on them, it would be reasonable for one to assume that they are at the very least an accurate representation of students' knowledge. Unfortunately, these tests often fail to achieve such goals. When someone is challenged with creating a new business idea or solving a social issue in today's world, there's not a multiple choice answer to solving these problems. Most of the time, practical knowledge and real-world issues are much more complex and require more than bubbling in an answer choice. Instead, such complex problems should be approached with complex solutions. Alternative methods of assessment, particularly those that are hands-on and require the student to teach the subject to another person, would be much more effective at demonstrating their knowledge of the subject. Such tests are not only able to achieve the same measurement of knowledge, but they are also much more enjoyable to the students. Changing the test would also change the environment of the test, thus reducing the stress that is put on its participants. So this is kind of another reason why standardized tests are ineffective. Outside circumstances such as lack of sleep, lack of nutrition, outside stress from anything that can be happening outside of school can all have a tremendous effect on a student's score on a particular test. So how do we encourage change in our education system? Standardized testing is on its way out as we discover more and more about its deficiencies and its effectiveness. With a concentrated effort, it is possible to encourage a shift towards easier, more reliable methods of assessments for students. This shift will help make schooling a better experience for future generations to help encourage them to reach new levels of academic and career achievement. So, in order to go about this, you can become an active and involved member in local politics. Now, this does not mean that you have to become a local politician and hang out with all the bigwigs in your local town. This simply means doing things such as attending school board meetings, town hall meetings, or even just writing to a local politician or influential individual explaining your concerns. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
That was much